Hey everyone, I am MSK, aka Master Swag King, coming at you guys today with another video. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about the past weekend at the worldwide box office. But before I start talking about the past weekend at the worldwide box office, I want to give you guys just a little quick update. The content on the channel will be coming out more consistently as regards to, pre-recorded videos. So my strategy for the channel as per releasing videos will be basically I'm going to pre-record a lot of videos, then obviously upload them to you guys, and in the meantime of uploading all of these other pre-recorded videos that I would have already have done, I will be working on more videos. That way you guys will have a consistent streamline of content while I am also working on, pre-recording other videos as well. That way you won't be having these big gaps in days without me actually uploading a video. And I know there's been a lot of, articles coming out surrounding, video games, movies, TV shows, anime, comic books, manga, streaming. I know all that stuff is out there, and I will be making individual videos on those specific topics as well. And like you guys have probably seen, we are still going through a writer's strike actually. So I know a lot of people right now are having great discussions and talking about the way a lot of movies are coming out right now. But you must keep this in mind, which is the basis of there isn't any movies getting worked on right now or new TV shows actually because of the current writer strike, which means that, a lot of people are just kind of living in the moment right now of all these new movies coming out, but aren't realizing that, hey, by the time we have Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom coming out, which is coming out in December, we won't have anything else. So movies will be getting delayed, not just until 2025, potentially until 2026 actually, because right now, as you guys have seen, like I mentioned previously, the current writer strike is still going on. So, hopefully they can get that situation figured out, but that is a can of worms that I don't really feel like opening right now on this specific video. This is probably something I would probably do in a separate video, or I would just talk about it on my The Iron Man podcast actually, which just hit 50 episodes actually. So I did the numbers on my other podcasts actually that have now been obviously, canceled / ended. Overall, I think I should be somewhere past like 500 episodes, for my actual podcast. And that's why I'm going to be, obviously, putting out episodes pretty much every single day, obviously, if I can, and obviously doing, gaming streams as well. I will be playing other games as well, but, it's just so much easier to just boot up League and just start playing League actually. But yeah, I want to get my podcast to 300 episodes. That is the initial goal. And then obviously the ultimate goal is getting it past 500 episodes, because that's where I feel like I should be at right now, given all the other shows that I've had in the past. And yes, the Iron Man podcast will be on podcasting platforms very, very soon. I will be uploading all of my the Nightwing podcast episodes onto podcasting platforms. That way that show can get fully done. Once that show has its last episodes released, then obviously I can start working on the Iron Man podcast and getting that up onto podcasting platforms as well. So if I have to create a new Spotify account to get that to happen, I'll do that. But if I can use the same one that I already have to get it done, then that will be the case for that situation. So just wanted to update you guys on several things that are important, not only for the channel, but also happening within the movie industry as well. So let's talk about The Flash, which is the 13th installment in the DC Extended Universe. So I mentioned in last week's weekend box office video that I was going to do a separate video on The Flash, but I thought to myself, it's better to just bundle it up in this because we're talking about the box office anyway. So there is something very fundamentally, like, to the core about this movie that you guys should probably know. This movie had its worldwide box office total last I think about a week and a half ago for the most part. And also, sorry if you guys saw that little note there. I write everything down actually, and I always make sure to copy and paste it because that way if I make any edits, then obviously, I could, just have them right here. I always make sure I pin it to the clipboard, and, I can always go there and be like, okay, I got that video done. But nevertheless, so The Flash's worldwide box office total came out to an abysmal number. Now, everyone already knew this movie flopped, Everyone knew that, right? This movie had a $200 million budget, and it obviously had gotten delayed multiple times, and multiple times is an understatement because it got delayed a lot of times, actually. Got delayed a few more times toward the back end of when COVID first started. And then we also have the marketing, which was pumped into this movie as well. We know Warner Brothers pumped in a lot of money to promote this movie because this was the first movie that had a trailer at the Super Bowl for Warner Brothers in like the last 10 years, actually. I think the last movie they promoted at the Super Bowl was like The Dark Knight, actually. So that's crazy. And then we had a lot of like the big industry people saying, hey, like, this movie's really, really good. It's better than The Dark Knight, even though every movie that comes out after The Dark Knight always gets compared to The Dark Knight. Just goes to show you how good The Dark Knight really is. And like a lot of like weird, cringy people online want to say it's not that good, even though they always compare it to the movie. Like, if you don't think it's that good, why are you always comparing to the Dark Knight? Really interesting, right? So the other point to really bring up here is this movie was pretty much always doomed to fail for the most part, not even just because of a movie it was going to be, because I think I watched the movie myself. I don't think it's that good. Honestly, I think it's pretty bad for the most part. Like, I gave it a rating of, I don't give ratings anymore, but if you ask me personally, I would give it like a 5 out of 10, like 6 out of 10, something like that, probably, and The Flash is a character that I love so much. I like the Flashpoint book. I have that book. I really enjoy it, honestly. Flashpoint animated movie's absolutely amazing, and this movie is just basically just a ghetto version of, Flashpoint. It just is. Not only the book, but also just a ghetto version of that movie, too. It's just, I don't have time to really go down all this movie's problems, but the Flash character was just initially set up to fail in this movie, right? They really treated the character like shit from the other past movies he was mentioned in, and also he starred in as well, and it was never going to work. This universe already like started out bad, and this is kind of just like the ramifications of a universe starting pretty like jank, and then you having like other subsequent installments in the franchise coming out that have to kind of basically be like, I don't know, what's the best way of putting it? Like, the universe came out like such dog shit when it first started that all these other movies after like Aquaman just kind of feel like band-aids, until they just kind of figured out, well, let's just do something big with these characters, which is what Walter Amato wanted to do. But then, as you guys know, all those plans got, shifted and moved and destroyed when they obviously brought in David Zaslav and James Gunn and Peter Safran, obviously, And the other bigger problem with this is not even just all that stuff that I just told you. It's just the other angle of the media trying to make out this movie's numbers as if like they're not like abysmal, right? So this is another thing that I need to bring up to you guys. So I know a lot of people don't hear me talk about the whole inflation thing, but that doesn't really matter to me in most cases because that is such a time-specific thing that type of argument could just go either or, and it doesn't really matter, honestly. All we have is the numbers in and of itself, and that's what we need to go on, right? So the media would always try to be like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's only failed because the fans let it fail. And it's like, that's so fucking stupid. You know what I mean? Like, here, the budget was around $200 to $220 million. And this is just roughly, too. Like, this is just the number that they're reporting, right? Then you gotta count in the marketing, right? So, the movie took in $268.5 million. So, like I always tell you guys to do, take the movie's budget and times it by 3, actually, because you have to also count, since the film is getting released internationally, it needs to make even more money, right? If a movie has a worldwide release, it has to make even more money to cover, obviously, the cost of distributing a movie worldwide in a bunch of different territories. People don't understand how much money that costs to distribute your movie in, let's say, Russia or China or Puerto Rico or all that other places, right? So, $200 million budget times 3. You would need to put it at, you need to put it around $600 million. That's just breaking even, okay? There's a break-even point as well. Now, if you factor in marketing, so big blockbuster tentpoles usually have an $80 million marketing cost, especially with that one. You probably think it's going to be around $80 million, right? This movie would need to have made like Thor Love and Thunder numbers to actually have maybe slightly inked a profit, and I still don't even think at that point it honestly would have. Now, take it at 220 then. 220 times 3. 660 million, right? The movie made $265.8 million. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, the money a movie makes doesn't equal to the quality of film. That is true. That's a very true statement, but like people who put their money to this don't care about that. They just want to make sure the movie's profitable. That's it. You know, there's so much stuff that goes into this and people just don't understand because they're just talking from a stupid, idiotic, naive standpoint that they think the number that you accumulate there could obviously cover everything. Now, I didn't even mention the fact that theaters take a cut, right? That's why I say when you have big budgets like this, these movies have to be taking in at least $750 to around almost $900 million. Now, if you're talking from the $300 million point of view, it would need $1 billion actually, right? Now, someone, I think it was on my other podcast saying, no, if The Flash made $400 million, then that's good. Like, no, that's not good. This movie making $400 million would have been awful too. You know, the fact that it was as big of a flop as it is absolutely ridiculous in and of itself. And anyone saying otherwise is fucking retarded. I'm sorry. You're stupid if you think that's a good number. That's a terrible number, actually. That's a pitiful number. You know, that's really bad. This is honestly one of the biggest flops ever for Warner Brothers. Not counting the millions in marketing that they took to spend on marketing this movie and the horrible misdirection of the film. It's just all the problems, has all the problems, all right? But do not let the media gas you into thinking that's a good number, right? Now, theaters take like what? I forgot how much theaters take in terms of a cut. I think it's like 40% or something like that. Factor in that, you know, just L's across the board, right? So then, Looper had an article about this. I know other sites did, and I know Hollywood Reporter started being like, oh no, the budget number changed and shit like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the budget is definitive $200 million or if the budget was definitively 220. It doesn't matter, okay? It literally doesn't matter. I know I've seen that happen from this past week, and it's just stupid. It's a dumb thing that you try to always LARP on. Just because the budget was slightly under or over where like they initially reported doesn't mean the end result wasn't a failure. The end result was a huge failure, and that's how that cookie crumbles, actually. The Flash crosses the global box office's finish line, so is it really a flop? The answer is yes. It's over for The Flash. As schools around the nation open their doors and the weather becomes chillier, the summer movie season is wrapping up after the COVID-19 pandemic. The box office is continuing to rebound. As of this writing, the 2023 box office is higher than 2022's receipts by nearly 25% per Box Office Mojo. That's a good thing, actually. Overall, this year's domestic haul stands tall at $6.5 billion. While these aren't pre-pandemic numbers, a number of tentpoles this summer, namely Barbie and Oppenheimer, have compelled audiences to return to the multiplex. And while 2023 is filled with success stories at the box office, it's also riddled with failures and bombs that Hollywood will never forget. Yes, that's true. One such case is Warner Brothers' long gestating The Flash. Initially announced in 2014, the Ezra Miller-led flick finally debuted in mid-June this year and was essentially dead on arrival. On paper, the film was the perfect cinematic outing for even the most casual DC fans. It featured the return of Michael Keaton's Batman, whose debuted 1989 flick made a whopping $250 million stateside, as well as the introduction of Supergirl, played expertly by Sasha Callel. I wouldn't say that, actually. And if the early hype was to be believed, then The Flash would have emerged as one of the best comic book films of all time. A multiverse narrative with compelling cameos and surprises. The marketing for The Flash pitched this as Spider-Man No Way Home for DC fans. But unlike the Spidey threequel, which wrapped up its global run with $1.9 billion in late 2021, the Andy Muschietti directed Flash barely conjured up a $270 million global haul, with a domestic total of $108 million and an international cum of just $159 million. The Flash is one of DC's biggest box office flops. And you think like a character like The Flash would be such a name recognizable character for a lot of casual fans that they would just want to watch the movie in general just based off that, but that's not the case. And I've mentioned this before, the general audience when it comes to DC movies have just been they're so done. You can tell it in the numbers. It technically started with Shazam, and I loved the first Shazam movie, which came out back in 2019. It technically started with that one, but people try to like gas those numbers up to be a little bit more better than what they actually are. But you could say Birds of Prey was the definitive, like, hey, this is starting to really, really show here, you know? The Flash's disastrous domestic run. According to the numbers, The Flash has wrapped up its theatrical run stateside. The film debuted with an impressive 4,200 plus theater count on June 16th. They gave this movie all the big theaters. Actually, that's pretty much the max number you can get, or a little bit 100 more than that, actually. More screens didn't lead to stellar receipts, as the film fizzled with a $55 million debut domestically, averaging $13,000 per theater, while it opened at number 1 at the box office. The film did face some competition. The Flash opened alongside Elemental, which debuted to a haul just shy of $30 million. Pixar's latest was originally deemed a bomb, just like The Flash, only for Elemental to pick up steam thanks to positive word of mouth. To date, the animated flick has grossed over $460 million, emerging as a viable success for the House of Mouse. I don't know. That one's also like, that's not really a success. If you look at the actual budget and the marketing probably attached to it, I wouldn't say that's a success at all, personally. Since the media, once again, gassing things up for no reason whatsoever. The Flash, however, did not boast positive legs, forcing the Michael Keaton and Ezra Miller-led film to crater in its sophomore weekend. With a second weekend haul of $15 million, it was immediately clear to pundits that The Flash simply did not have the momentum needed to sustain a profit. By its third weekend, Miller's first solo outing as Barry Allen was taking hold of the number 8 spot at the box office, facing unlikely competition from the likes of Jennifer Lawrence's No Hard Feelings and the animated Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. During its 5th weekend, The Flash managed to have a hold on less than 800 theaters. By August 17th, just over 60 days after its release, the film was playing in just 16 theaters in United States and Canada, making a per theater average of $12, the average cost of one ticket. As of August 29th, the film has all but evaporated from cinemas already available to stream on the Warner Brothers backed streaming service Max. Yeah, the movie did so bad that they basically pulled it out within about not even 2 months. That would be like 6 weeks probably, at the most, which is like a month and some change probably. Digesting the domestic Flash numbers. Also, like, if this was kind of built as like a No Way Home for like DC fans, then I don't really know if they got it. I mean, like, looking at No Way Home and looking at this, I'm not comparing the movies in and of itself, but the concept of what No Way Home was doing versus what this was doing, I wouldn't really compare them personally. I feel like they're a little bit more different, honestly. I personally feel like a lot of how the movie didn't make any money was due to Ezra Miller's, media bashing that he got. Overall, I'm not saying all of it's justified or all of it's wrong or right. It's more like because the media does kind of pile on, as a bad situation is happening. It's also another case of, if people just really got a bad read on this guy and didn't like all the things that they were hearing about him, that would definitely cause the movie to do bad. So this movie just didn't do bad from one angle. It's more like, okay, it's gonna do bad from multiple angles. Ezra Miller, people already not caring about DC movies in the box office anymore from the casual audience point of view. You also have what people assume, which was the James Gunn DCU slate announcement that they think killed the momentum of any of the other future DC movies coming out this year, because a lot of fans would think like, why would I want to support the movies coming out this year when it's going to get rebooted anyway? And I've also shared that sentiment to some degree, based off like going to these movies that I did go to, and you have these post-credit scenes there for a universe that you know doesn't exist come 2025, you know? The Flash ended its domestic run with a haul of $108 million, nothing short of a disaster. What makes these numbers particularly disheartening is how much faith Warner Brothers had in this picture. While the film failed to live up to the hype set up by early reviews and the expectations set by Tom Cruise and Stephen King, it wasn't a complete critical misfire. The film has a semi-decent 64% from Rotten Tomatoes critics and an 83% score from verified audience members. Having a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes is pretty bad for the most part. I know people don't like to hear that sometimes, but having anything on Rotten Tomatoes that's from, I think, critics that's less than 70 kind of implies the movie's pretty meh or pretty bad for the most part. And 64%, if you ask about that in terms of like school percentages, like maybe say public school, that would be like a D in most cases, right? Or at least a D plus right there. In short, The Flash isn't operating at the same critical level as prominent superhero bombs like 2015's Four Stick. Beyond that, Warner Brothers made consistent efforts to market the film as effectively as possible, believing they had a genuine hit on their hands. The studio debuted the first look at their latest DC project during the Super Bowl, creating a trailer that strategically put Michael Keaton's Batman front and center. Yeah, and also the reason why they mentioned strategically putting Michael Keaton in that aspect is because Ezra Miller, so at that moment in time, was going through a lot. And, you know, it was a movie that they were so scared of putting Ezra Miller as the forefront character. You really didn't see him until like the second trailer. And I feel like the trailers for these movies nowadays have been really, really just showing way too much, you know, to the point where not saying seeing the whole movie's kind of hyperbolic, but you've seen all the really good juicy parts. I think people need to go back to putting out less minutes in their trailers. You don't need to be seeing like 3 minutes for a trailer. That's way too much, you know? It was an explosive trailer, one that logically showed off the film's cameos and set pieces while teasing an epic multiverse narrative. Coupled with the goodwill elicited from early screenings, Warner Bros. Aggressively pushed the film, hosting multiple free fan screenings just weeks before the project's release to drum up social media chatter. Yeah, multiple free screenings where you don't make money from them? That's not good. Clearly, none of that worked, as The Flash doesn't even boast a mediocre box office run for a superhero flick. Like the $400 million haul from 2021's Eternals or the Man of Steel's $668 million total. DC's latest was simply treated with indifference, something signaled by its 72% drop during its sophomore weekend. Social media buzz, mixed to positive reviews, and a strategically placed Keaton appearance weren't enough for domestic fans of the iconic hero, so how could it be compelling for those abroad? I like how they never mentioned the fact that Ezra Miller having all that shit happening might have had a big impact on the film's box office. International audiences didn't care for The Flash. International audiences have always saved big-budget, action-focused spectacles from domestic doom and gloom. The Meg is the perfect example of an action-heavy flick that soared thanks to its over 380 international haul, fueled largely by China. For a superhero flick, one can look at Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp, which nabbed over 65% of its $620 million plus haul from international markets. While the United States and Canada might be the creative home for superheroes, international audiences have always appreciated Hollywood's interpretations of iconic characters. The Flash had an international total of 159 million, a number that's significantly lower than the 223 million foreign haul brought in by Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam. Note that Johnson's DC outing didn't even release in China, unlike The Flash. In the Middle Kingdom, Ezra Miller's solo flick only nabbed 27 million, a far cry from the near 300 million total that 2018's Aquaman brought in. Besides China, the film received a 19 million total from Mexico and 11 million from the United Kingdom. Compare these minor hauls to recent superhero films, and the failure of The Flash becomes even more pronounced. Compare these numbers to non-superhero films with smaller budgets and less prevalent IP recognition, and the disappointment of DC's latest, it's eye-widening. 2022's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish raked in over $299 million internationally, despite competing with James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water during peak holiday time. Even this year's R-rated John Wick Chapter 4 boasts higher international receipts than The Flash. International audiences barely took notice of The Flash, instead choosing to prop up Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Elemental at the box office. Both have foreign totals north of $300 million. Yeah, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, an amazing movie, absolutely loved it. You know, great movie actually. So yeah, it's not just like this movie's had steep competition. It's like the other movies have like less IP recognition. Like The Flash is arguably more iconic than a lot of these other movies that we just named right here. Not just kind of like Spider-Man, right? Why did audiences reject The Flash? I wonder if they're going to mention Ezra Miller here. Why did international audiences reject The Flash? The same reason why domestic audiences did. Pure indifference. Okay. Despite trying its best to function as a crowd-pleasing film that speaks to all demographics, audiences who weren't invested in DC had no reason to show up for The Flash. Take a look at DC's box office returns over the last few years, and it's obvious the audiences are growing indifferent with each subsequent release. Shazam! Fury of the Gods wrapped up with a $132 million haul, and 2021's Suicide Squad barely crossed $170 million worldwide. As the years have gone by, audiences have little to no interest in DC's vision for a shared universe. Yeah. I mean, the initial start to the DCEU was really bad with Zack Snyder, and then everything after, like, Joss Whedon's Justice League was just coasting at that point, if we're being honest here. Instead, they've become receptive to standalone, grounded offerings fueled by singular voices. 2019's Joker, for all of its controversies, was a $1 billion R-rated grosser, and 2022's The Batman, which was helmed by Matt Reeves, had receipts north of $765 million. While it's unfair to call DC a tainted brand, their totals speak for themselves, especially after Aquaman. And while superhero projects are no longer as favorable as they once were, Marvel is still able to pull solid numbers from its expansive fan base. But the fatigue has definitely manifested, and audiences are all ready to vote for their wallet and ignore projects they aren't must-watches in cinema. So what they're saying right there is superhero movies don't have the pull like they used to, the point where you have to just watch all of them instantly, right? People are gonna go, all right, I'm skipping this one, and I'll watch this one, but I'll skip that one, if it's not like a character you're that interested in, or it's a must-see, right? It happened with Marvel this year. The Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania grossed $463 million worldwide, while critically acclaimed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 soared high with a total shy of $850 million. Right? Yeah. I mean, the Ant-Man movies have never really been that big compared to like the other MCU movies. Their numbers have been impressive to say the least, but it's not been as good as other MCU movies, obviously. Despite decent marketing, The Flash just didn't speak to audiences if the film had lived up to its pre-release hype. It's possible that this film could have legged out like Elemental. Instead, it was merely watched by DC's hardcore fan base, which seems to be disinterested in every new release. The Flash is another box office flop for DC. Perhaps the narrative intentions of The Flash were misguided. While folding Michael Keaton in was a strategic play, it may have been a poor decision to center most of the marketing surrounding his inclusion, especially when one considers that his rendition of Batman is particularly popular with older audience members. Older audiences haven't been returning to cinemas as frequently as younger viewers, meaning they're far more selective with their viewings. However, older viewers did show up for The Flash, with 70% of the film's opening weekend audience being over 25. This means that most families and teenagers skipped The Flash, a superhero movie quite literally meant to appeal to all demographics. Internationally, Keaton's Batman just doesn't have the same clout as he does stateside. Unlike Spider-Man No Way Home, which featured the return of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, the legacy characters of The Flash just don't have the same foreign appeal. If marketing is focused on a character you have no reverence for, chances are that you'll skip the project. Ultimately, The Flash barely managed to cross $270 million worldwide, a total that's shockingly low in what's still considered to be the golden age of superhero cinema. With a budget of $200 million, not accounting for the marketing spending per the Hollywood Reporter, The Flash is a box office disaster for DC. While it's unclear how much the film will lose at the box office analyst Luis Fernando doesn't rule out a loss north of $200 million. While it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what went wrong for The Flash, the project will likely remain a sordid reminder for Warner Brothers as they continue to move forward with James Gunn's vision for the DC franchise. Wow. Goodness gracious. And I do like their point of view on why The Flash didn't do as well as it did. And before I finish off this portion of the video, I'll cover the other weekend box office. To be fair, this is kind of weekend box office anyway with The Flash, but just here, I'll do a separate video covering those variety articles right there. But for The Flash, let's be honest here. From just my point of view, to kind of like wrap all this up, The Flash as a character was treated like straight shit by the DC Extended Universe and by Warner Brothers in general. This character had barely little to any setup, and the Flash movie itself doesn't even feature the Reverse Flash, even though the movie clearly calls for it. And I'll just say this, I don't give a fuck that other movies don't put their main villains in there. There's plenty of superhero movies out there that include their main villains in their first movie. Plenty of examples, right? This movie not having Reverse Flash is just an absolute L, and I don't care what anyone says about that specific opinion of just how they view that. My opinion is this movie needs a Reverse Flash, and I personally feel like just leading off with all this other stuff just confused people, right? Also, Ezra Miller is just not a popular public figure, so a lot of people just went like, hey, I'm not supporting this guy in theaters, which I think is a wrong point of view because there's other people involved with the movie that didn't do anything, but one guy could just essentially ruin everything. And DC's box office has been having so many diminishing returns since 2019 Shazam to the point where it's like, people just aren't interested anymore. Or maybe you could kind of attribute that to Joss Whedon's Justice League, because a Justice League movie making as much as it did on that kind of budget is a massive flop by far, And I just, I've always been under this impression too with this point of view, people always say they like something, but when push comes to shove, they don't really support it. I mean, is Ezra Miller's interpretation of The Flash really that supported? I'm just saying, his version of Flash, I just don't like at all. Even when I watched the Flash movie, I just didn't think it was that good, honestly. He had some moments where he shined, but other than that, I just don't think his Flash portrayal is really all that good. I just think it's just really cringy for the most part. So, yeah, universe structure all over the place with the DCEU. It started out like shit. It's going to pretty much end like shit. Hopefully, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is going to maybe end this franchise off on a high note, depending on if that movie's good at all, because Shazam 2, not that good. Flash, not that good. I haven't got a chance to check out Blue Beetle yet, but hopefully that is good. People have been kind of mixed on that one too. So, yeah, For any of the media out there trying to be like, oh no, this is no, the number that the movie took in at the box office, given its budget and marketing, was absolutely terrible. Also, most of the trailers didn't really feature Ezra Miller either, because they're leading off with Michael Keaton's Batman, even though this is supposed to be a solo Flash movie. Good lord. I mean, the movie flopping is probably what was going to happen anyway, given the fact that, you know, he had all these delays and Ezra Miller and the changing in Warner Bros. Leadership. So much shit, right? But yeah, why do you guys think The Flash flopped at the box office, actually? You know, a lot of reasons. And, you know, for me personally, the Flash movie itself is just a ghetto, disgusting version of Flashpoint, which doesn't even feature Flash villains and is so stupidly convoluted that the movie had been delayed so much to the point where, like, wait a minute, this is what you came up with all this time? Crazy, right? There was those alternate endings that the Flash, you know, had that they just didn't go with, which were better alternate endings in general. I don't get it. But what do you guys think in the comment section below? I'll see you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I am MSK, and this is Online Cinema Entertainment, your one place for online cinema. All right, see you guys later. Peace. Deuces.